Hi everybody, this is the next tutorial in the series I'm working on about using SketchUp and Twinmotion together, and this one's going to focus on an issue that came up yesterday in a discussion with some students about creating buildings. If you have a site that either has existing buildings that came from Placemaker that are just blank boxes, or you're at a site where, as some of the students that I'm working with are using now, that it's under development, but they're developing a piece of property that's going to be surrounded by buildings that don't exist yet. So trying to create some placeholder buildings to give a little context to the specific site is important. And there's several ways to do that using images, and I'm going to run through a few of those. Some of these are useful in SketchUp and Twinmotion if you're going to actually add some geometry to them. Then you can use these kind of quicker methods and add the geometry, reapply new textures, and then they work fine in Twinmotion. If you actually want to use the image, the photographic image, as part of the model in Twinmotion, there's really only one way to do it, and that's using Photoshop, and I'll demonstrate that method as well. The reason for that is there's ways to distort images to fit on a particular piece of geometry or a facade of a building in SketchUp, and it looks great in SketchUp, but when you move it to Twinmotion, because that image has been distorted by SketchUp's particular tools, they don't display properly in Twinmotion, and they really are not valuable for trying to create the kind of modeling that you can do there. So the first one I'm going to use is SketchUp's built-in PhotoMatch system. And if you've imported textures, if you haven't used this before, you might have noticed that in addition to importing an image as an image texture, there's also a new matched photo. And you want to get a photograph. In this case, it's a rendering, computer rendering of a building that has as much of the facade. Ideally, I guess something like this that shows both sides more evenly. I'll demonstrate this one with another method later because this one looks like it's right, but it actually doesn't work. You can see that these lines have all been corrected. This is more of a drawing, and it's from a vantage point that should create a three-point perspective, but the vertical lines have all been made to be vertical. So the PhotoMatch doesn't really work with it very well. In this case, you can see that there is convergence in that vertical dimension, and that's what PhotoMatch is looking for, like you would get in a photograph if you went out, pointed your camera up a little bit, and took a picture from the corner of the building. And that's ideally, if you want to use your own photographs, you can. And if you can get a photograph of the building and show both sides, that's the best. This is great for demonstration. It shows most of one side and enough of the other that I can make it work. So I'm going to make sure I have this on new matched photo, click import, and here I am. So the first thing I'm going to do here, you notice I've got my XYZ kind of in the center here, blue, green, and red axis, and then I've got these red pairs of red and green convergence lines that I have to use to match the perspective in SketchUp with the perspective in this photograph. So first thing I want to do is move this over here and just locate that origin at the front corner of the building. Once you do that, I'm going to click and drag on these red lines and move them over here, because you can see that this part of the grid is converging to the left vanishing point and the green is converging to the right. So I want to keep these on the right sides and keep the orientation appropriate. So I'm going to kind of move these top lines up to a corner that I can see. It doesn't have to be on a corner as long as it's along that line, and then I can drag this down to line up with that convergence. Same with here. I can do it down at the base here. Just grabbing the line, not the point, not the end point. And then once you get that, then you can pull the end point down to locate that in space. You can see there's a little bit of back and forth adjustment. I'm getting closer now, and then I can zoom in on this. You can see that this is actually a little off there, and then has to come down a little bit there. It's just a little bit of trial and error. And this one, see, I'm not. The more I move these, this gets closer to vertical. Same thing with with the green lines. And sometimes you do have to just tweak it a little bit to get it to line up with the vertical. All right, I'm going to use that. Come down a little bit more. There we go. So keep moving those around. Again, click and drag on the dash line to move it to a position where you can check the convergence. And the longer lines that you have, this isn't really as good because I only have a little short piece of line there. This I actually have a longer line, and I can see where that's going. So once I've got this kind of lined up and I have that vertical where I want it, I can come over here and click on Done. Now, when I do that, it gives me a view that I can start drawing in. And you also notice that it created a scene, a saved scene over here, and that's because I guarantee as you're doing this, you can use any of these tools, but you can only work in this view. So if you orbit your cursor, which you're going to do because it's a habit, you lose that grid. So now one of the things I noticed before, and this is good, if you've got this finished, the vertical line is lined up, but Mark here is pretty much still a giant, right? And so I'm like, okay, I forgot to adjust the scale of this. So in order to do that, just come back over here and click on the little edit matched photo icon. And then to fix this problem, I'm going to come over here and click on that line and just drag down. You'll see the grid scaling down until he's about the same size. And this looks pretty good. These people are right in the horizon line. These are a little, she's closer to here, so it's about through the neck there. And that looks pretty good. Now you can see over here that actually has a 5-foot grid spacing on it. So that can also give you an idea of, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 feet across there. So if you don't know the dimensions of the building, this kind of can help you understand that, and it gets it in the right size just by using that scale figure. All right, so now I've got that done. I'll click Done again. And I find that it's a little easier probably to do this with just the pencil tool. So I'm going to go down along here to this first edge. Then I'm going to go up to there, over to there, and back down. And if it makes a plane, you should see that plane come across here as a kind of semi-transparent edge. Now, this isn't looking real good. I kept that line up there a little bit, but I'm just going to use this and go across here. And going off the picture, okay, up to there, to there. Again, this is an approximation, but I can go the other direction too. I can go along the red axis, go down, and then back to there. And then I can come across here. I'm not going to try and connect to that edge. I'm going to go about halfway here. And if you go slowly, it'll hit a point. You'll see that point come up. There we go. And then back to there. And the way you can tell if this is working is now I can orbit. You can see it looks like I'm starting to get that basic pattern of those buildings in there. And I could come in this view with the same pencil tool and come across here, hold the shift key down, go to there, hold the shift key. And I can get rid of that line. And then when I've kind of fixed those couple things, I can come back, click on this again, and it's going to wrap me right into that same view. And then I can start working the other direction. Get a little bit here, up this way. I'm going to come back to here. I always like to try and keep coming down to connect up to what you have. So now I can come out along the red. I can hold the shift key down, come up to here. Oops. Now let's start from here and come back down. And back to there. So again, I'm starting to create those edges. I missed this one, so I can fill that in. So anyway, it gives you a quick, at least now I have enough that if I wanted to get rid of that photograph and start modeling the rest of this, I can do that. And as I was saying, if you're just going to use this in SketchUp, then one of the cool features that it has is you can come back over here and say project textures from photo. And it says override existing materials, yes. Trim partially visible faces, no. And now when I start orbiting, those textures have been mapped right onto that. And I don't know if this will work or not because I don't know exactly if it's projected, but I could try mapping that onto there, and it works pretty well. So this, as it stands, is useful for you to use it in SketchUp. The problem is in Twinmotion, as I said. So if I save this, I'll just save it as. Yeah, and then we go pop over to Twinmotion, and let's just import it in here. I like to collapse all. You can see what that looks like. Not so hot. If you're doing a earthquake simulation, then yeah, maybe that's going to work for you. Looks like the building structure is starting to collapse there, but it just creates these distorted images that really aren't going to do you too much good. So, but the other thing you can do is if you have this, let's just come off here a little bit. You can come in here and trace over these windows, and or you could use components. And you could just start copying these through here, change the material, and once you add this geometry in for all these windows, you could apply this kind of block texture to the surface, and then when you bring that into Twinmotion, you can use their image library of materials, or you can keep the ones that you had in SketchUp, and you actually could model these windows, turn it into a component, and then copy it. So again, it depends on how much time you want to put into it. If it's for context in another site where you're doing the landscape architectural design, not the architectural design, then you might do this for the buildings, add this geometry for the buildings that are really close, but then for the ones who are farther back, just using the images are fine. And again, I'll show you a method for doing that. Okay, so that's the first one, just using the PhotoMatch system within within SketchUp. And the second method then is to use images, but not to use PhotoMatch. And I'm not going to go through another demonstration of PhotoMatch to show you that it doesn't work, but building demo. Okay, so I mentioned that this photograph that I looked at before has a little more of an ideal situation, but the problem is the verticals are all vertical. And if you use that in PhotoMatch, you'll see that you'll never get the lines to line up with this because they always want to converge this way. And then if you follow that line, then when you straighten it out, they'll be distorted. So what you can do though is just take a simple box like this and this photograph, and then you can map that manually onto the different sides. And this is a case where I went in and I just added a window components. I cut in some of this and changed the materials on it, pushed these buildings back and forth so that these images, when you bring them into Twinmotion, don't look very good. But of course, this is going to because it's got materials. And then as you move back, if you were doing a design for a square or something here, you could add the detail for these first few buildings. But then as you move down here, along the street, I just put rectangles and put glass in there, and there's no detail, and I could, fix this up in some way and just put very little detail because as you're looking at that from the distance, it's going to look fine. You don't really need to see all the detail. It just depends on whether that's important to your design. So let me show you how to get this image on here. It's just simply applying it as an image. So I'm going to start, let's just delete this out of here. I'm going to go back and import again. And there's my picture, and this time I'm just going to import it as a texture. So I'm just going to put it on there so it fits. I don't really care about the spacing of it right now. So this, if we right-click and choose texture position, we can use this to scale it up and do all the things that you're used to doing within that. But that's not really going to help us here because this is in perspective, and we're trying to put it onto a flat elevation of a building, right? So if I right-click and uncheck fixed pins, I get our floating pins, and that's same method for putting a site plan on a plan planar surface. Horizontal surface is what we can do here. So I'm just going to click and move this to the front corner. I'll click, let go, move this to the that corner. This one, it's probably somewhere right about in there. And this one. Now, I don't know if this line and this line are exactly the same. They don't look like they are to me. It looks like this one's a little higher. So just going to use a guesstimate. You'll see how we can adjust this. And I can still move this over and kind of get it centered. I also don't really know how tall this is. So this is a case where I don't have an adjustment like the PhotoMatch. I just have to pull this out. Let's just start by locking this in. Okay, that one's a little off. Get that back in the corner. Okay, pull this one down. Now, if I really want to keep this proportional, what I need to do is stretch this all the way up so that these are on the corners, right? So that's giving me more of an elevational view. Now, if I look at that and say, okay, I can tell from that original image, which we could look at if I hadn't deleted it, looks a little vertical, right? A little stretched vertically. So let's just say done, because it's going to remember those pin locations. I'm just going to pull this down maybe that far. Again, a little bit of trial and error, right click, texture, position. My pins are still where they're supposed to be, so I'm just going to pull those back down. And now I'm starting to feel like, obviously it's a little distorted. I can see my lines here are not parallel with the top. So that tells me, got to pull that up a little bit. So maybe this building is taller. That's getting a little closer. That looks pretty good. Still look a little vertical to me. Again, it's a little trial and error, so let's just go done. And yeah, actually, if I look at the one I did already, you can see it is a bit higher. So just going to push this down a little further. It's in the same ballpark. Right click, texture, position. Just pull that onto there. Pull that down to there. There, that's starting to look a little bit better. Okay, so once that's done, click done there. And if I wanted to, pull up another part of this so I can have the trim that's on the top, I just control clicked and get my paint bucket, pick this up, put it on there, and now I'm starting to see how high I need to come up. I can just use that image to give me that judgment. I can come in here and cut these pieces out and create those other buildings, which is basically what I did over here. I just went in and changed the geometry, and then also I can come in and just use these vertical lines. Now, obviously, this is some convergence in here, so I have to make a judgment. I'm kind of split the difference here, and maybe split the difference here. And this one actually looks to me like there might be space between these. So I'm going to bring another line up through here. And, we could push this building back, push that back, maybe push that one back a little bit more. Anyway, just try and create that rhythm in the edge, and I can draw lines across here. And that's really kind of just using that proportion and just using stretching those pins in order to make that look right. And then all I did with this building was to find a component that on the 3D warehouse, a window component, and you can there's a little trial and error to that. Not all, there's lots of windows on 3D warehouse. Some of them are designed as components and they automatically cut through like this one did. And some are not designed as components and they don't do anything. So you want to find the right one that when you place it on a surface, it cuts a hole in the surface. And then if you have a glass material, that renders pretty nice once you get it into Twinmotion, as we'll see. Let me just save this one. And let's go into Twinmotion, do a new scene, import. There we go. And again, a quick way to find it in Twinmotion, just hit it, select it in the scene graph, hit F, and you can spin around. So you can see, again, we have the same issue where we have this. It's really pretty crazy looking, but where we've gone in and actually added the windows, and even these simple ones back here, you can see how if we fix this facade up a little bit, you don't really have to do that much back there, and it works pretty well. Particularly if you're going to come in here, let's bring this down into the ground a little bit and add some trees in. Add some street trees across here. So if I move, let's make this one a little bit bigger. And gives a little space to look under here. There we go. You can see that if you're doing a streetscape and you took this and detailed it in this first couple buildings, maybe back to here, and then the rest of this, you could have some storefront windows and other things. It would make a pretty believable streetscape that you don't have to go to all the detail for all the other buildings. Okay, so that's another approach to doing it. Again, just manually stretch those images out, but then again, it's necessary to go through and cut in the geometry, at least the basic geometry. Otherwise, the image is going to look kind of funny. Okay, the last method is, let's go back to SketchUp and open up another model here. Okay, so here's an example of using images. I actually pulled these right out of Google Street View, Google Maps Street View, and started mapping on. So these are existing buildings. And these, if we take this building, for example, let's jump back into Twinmotion, make a new scene, go and check that one out. Where was that one at? Let's have a new park demo. Oh, there's building textures. There we go. Okay. Collapse all, drop that in there. And you can see now that they look perfectly straight. There's no distortion, and actually I think would work pretty well. They're a little bright, but some of that's the weather and location. I think there's still a couple little exposure issues with there's a lot of sun reflection. It's set up really high and a lot of ambient. So I'll show you, this is the next method. I'm going to show you how to create images that you can map on in SketchUp and then still have them look nice in Twinmotion. The advantage of this method is once you place them in SketchUp, you can actually swap them out really easily. If you want some variations, and I'll show just using some filters in Photoshop, or if you want your background buildings to be black and white and you want the adjacent context to be color, or just your new design to be in color and everything else to be in black and white. You see I just kind of actually have another site plan still up above. It's casting a shadow there. But anyway, you can set up around this park site So the buildings adjacent have all their image textures on them, and everything else is just grayed out. So you kind of keep that as a backdrop. It gets rid of the background, but makes it pretty simple. So let's go take a look at how we do that. All right, so this one has it. I think I have. This one is empty, yeah. All right, so you see when these buildings came in from Placemaker, they're all kind of the same height. You can randomize them, but since it's completely random, it doesn't really make any difference. You're better off paying attention to what's on the site and making the adjustments yourself once you know what's really there. And then I went to Google Street View and back up over here. All right, so this one, you just have to get at the right angle. And what I did with these, I captured them one side at a time just because I got better resolution. So for example, here I can actually see that whole building was probably somewhere like in this angle that I set it up. And there's a built-in capture tool in Windows called the snipping tool. And if you just click new, you can just come in here and just collect that image right off of there and just save it. I've already done this, so I'm not going to now. Save it to your hard drive. Obviously, this isn't super high resolution, but if you capture a side at a time from the best angle, it works pretty well. And then to set those up, what we want to do is work our way into Photoshop. So this is that same facade. I'm going to open up let's see if I can revert this back. Maybe not. All right. There's that capture that I captured. So there's my Guardian storage, and I'm just going to make a copy of this so I can work on this in a couple ways. So the first thing, the tool I'm going to use is, you may have used the crop tool. This is the perspective crop tool. It's been around in Photoshop for a while. And because I need this upper piece here, I'm going to start at this corner, and I'm basically just drawing around. And I'm just watching this line, and actually I know probably to get this more square is actually to, that ground is sloping across there a little bit. So, but once you draw it, you can come in here and just adjust it. So, you know, you're getting basically the edge of the building, what should be, if you were looking at an elevation, a rectangular shaped object. Once you've got that, just click OK, and it squares that off into an orthographic projection, basically. Once you save that, just save it as a PNG. Now I went through, I'm not going to do it here, but I went through and cut out the blue, so because I don't want that. This building has a little parapet wall that sticks up here, and so you can go in and clean it up. You could also, I didn't do it with this one, but you could also apply some filters to it. So if you want, let's say you wanted to, let's just go to image adjustments, desaturate. If you just want a black and white version, adjustments, brightness, so we can bump up the contrast a little bit. And then we can save that off as a separate image. You can apply any of the filters to them if you want more of a hand-done or watercolored look to it. And then when you come back into Photoshop, the method of applying it to the building is a little different. So I'm going to start in here, and actually I'm going to, it looks to me like this is a little bit higher, so I'm just going to raise it up. I'm going to use the file import, and this time again I'm going to use texture, and then I need to go up one and go to my textures folder. So here's the original view that I saved. Again, texture, not matched photo, and I'm going to snap that to the bottom and just snap it to the width. Now I'm assuming the width of this is straight, and you can see this actually is what it kind of should look like, because this ground is sloping down a little bit, and this is supposed to be level. Now I'm cutting off the top, so again, if I go back to my push-pull tool, I can pull this up until I get that lined up with the top, and then I can come back later and trim this out once I apply the other side to it. But once I've got that the way I want it, I can right click, oops, just click out of there and it's locked in. If I want to bring this one in, so in this case, I'm assuming the footprint that came in from Placemaker is correct. If you have the basic footprint, then this is a square image. I just adjust the height and then I know I've got it correct in there. And that's really all there is to it. Now, again, as I mentioned, the nice thing is, let's say I decide at some point I really want this to be, I decide I really want a black and white background. I can come in here, use my paint bucket, select this, and now if I go to the Edit tab, I can come over here and go to Browse for Material Image File. And if I had saved a version of this in black and white, all I have to do is select it, and it just swaps it right in there. So even if you wanted to, you wanted to use different images at different times for different types of renderings, you can do that. And again, the nice thing is, if I bring that into Twinmotion, let's just get rid of this one. If I save that or not, let's see. Our demo, save. Okay. That's interesting. Didn't update. It's the wrong file. Just make sure. VW. Let's get that one out of there. Get that one out of there. Let's just make a new project just to make sure. Okay. There we go. There we go. So now you can see it's brought that black and white version in, and the images are